Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. This is the math lesson for Wednesday, May 6th. We're going to do something just a little bit different today. We are going to work our way into exploring partitioning rectangles. Partitioning is just a fancy word for dividing. And when we talk about dividing, we're going to talk about equal groups. So when we are looking at doing some dividing of rectangles, we have to make sure that when we divide equally. So for example, let me show you. If we have a rectangle and we want to divide it, so I have this rectangle, and I want to divide it into fours. Okay, I'm going to partition or divide it into fours. This is how I would do that equally. I mean, to the best of my ability, since I'm not using a ruler, that would be equally. We want to, when we're partitioning, to try to do that the best we can. Do you see the difference between these two? They're both in 4 pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But this one has 4 more equal pieces, and this one has 4 pieces, but they're not equal. So I always tell the kids to look at it like this. If this were a chocolate bar, and I was passing it out to the class, would you be happy if you got the small piece or the bigger piece? Well, you'd probably, I know I would be happier to have the bigger piece. So what we want to do is try to avoid having smaller pieces and bigger pieces. When we talk about dividing things, we want them to have the equal sizes. All the pieces should be equal sizes. So if you look up at my picture here, nobody would really worry about what size piece they have because they're all mostly the same, okay? So when we divide them equally. Now, unless you're using a ruler, it's not going to be perfect, okay? So today we are looking at page 719. It says here, explore partitioning rectangles. It says Jen is using 12 squares to make a design in the shape of a rectangle. Now, if we were in class, I would be passing out those square 1-inch tiles for you. You'd each get 12, and you'd lay them to make a rectangle. Now, how would you do it? Would you make 1 row of 12 and have a really long rectangle? Might you do 2 rows of 6? Because 2 rows of 6, 6 plus 6 is 12. Or you could do 3 rows of 4. So you really could decide how you wanted to do that. Just as an example, and I'm going to make, so I'm not going to divide all these out, but this is one way you could make your rectangle. You could do 12 1-inch tiles. There's 12 squares in a row. You could make it a little bit smaller. I made an example here. You could make it like this, or you could make it more like this, where you would have, so this would be 1 row with 12, this would be 2 rows of 6, and this would be 3 rows of 4. So lots of different shapes if you were actually creating them with the square tiles that you could make. Okay, so I want you to just kind of play around with that. Now, what I ended up doing here at home is I took my scissors and I took my paper and I just made what I thought looked like a pretty good size square, and you can just cut it out and then you can start laying it side by side and trace them to get a better look at what you're doing if you want to do it that way. If you, I'm trying to think of any games out there that might have 1-inch squares or just a square. If you can find any square that's small that might fit into this space, that would probably work. And it would be easier to move them around instead of trying to draw them. So I wish that I had something for you to move around. I wish we were together and could do it up on the smartboard, but we don't. So we're just going to make the best of what we have. So this is what I started out with. I drew my rectangle, and then notice how I divided it into 2 equal pieces, And then I tried my best, I know these two are a little bit bigger, to divide these into six in each row, so 12 altogether, and that's what mine ended up being like. Like I said, you could do 1 row of 12, 2 rows of 6, 3 rows of 4, 4 rows of 3, okay, and you could go on. You could do 6 rows of 2, 1 row of 12, or 12 rows of 1 you could do. So a lot of different varieties. All right. This is so hard to teach you when we're not together. I'm sorry. There's just so many hands-on activities that make this easier. So the next thing I want to talk about is rows and columns. Okay? So these are the 2 words that are important for the day. So I want you to think about it this way. If you walk into the movie theater, okay, you're walking in. Let's pretend that these are the only seats left here. Now, here you are walking in, and you're looking down this way to figure out what row you want to sit in. So how many rows of empty seats would there be? Well, here's 1 row, here's 2 rows. There are only 2 rows open. So a row is looking across, lengthwise. Columns would be up and down. Here's a column, 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 here's a column. So there's 2 rows and 6 columns. So for all you math people, 6 times 2 is 12, or 6 plus 6 is 12. Okay, so rows and columns. Important thing to remember, if you're laying things in rows, it means you're laying them lengthwise. If it says draw 2 rows of 6, here's 2 rows, 1, 2, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in each row. So what it wants you to do on the back, number 3, it says, how many rows and columns could Jen's rectangle have? Well, I kind of went through that. There's only 12, so you have to come up with a variety of things. Mine had 2 rows of 6. You could have 1 row of 12. So go through it. 3 rows of what? 4 rows of what? Everything here has to equal 12. Okay? Number 2, it says Al is filling the large rectangle with 15 of the squares shown below. So here's the square. He wants to put 15 of them in here. Now, 15 is an odd number. So could you divide this into 2 rows and equally put 15 in? No, because each square would not have a match. It's an odd number. So I want to see if you can come up with how many would you put in 3 rows. So here's my rectangle. I'm going to try to evenly divide it. Look, here's my 3 rows. 1, 2, 3. How many in each row would you need to make 15 total? So kind of play with that. If you have, you know what might work for you? If you have M&Ms or, oh, I've got it perfectly. If you have a box of Cheez-Its, Cheez-Its would work perfectly for you to manipulate. Go ahead and get 15 Cheez-Its out and see if you can make a rectangle. Now, if you don't have Cheez-Its, you won't make a perfect rectangle with M&Ms or Skittles or, I don't know, gummy bears or something. See if you can find 15 of something and make 3 rows and see how many you need in each row to make 15. If we were in class, we would be using food, obviously. But we just can't do that. You probably could use cereal if you wanted to use cereal. Just find something that might work for you. And then it says you're going to draw lines to show how to fill the rectangles with the squares. So when it says draw lines, it means when you're finished, yours is good. Now this is not 15, this is only 12. I want to see what you come up with. And then the last one, number 3, how did you check your work to know that you use 15 squares? So it's a short answer question, and they want you to explain, how did you check your work? How do you know they fit? How do you know you use 15? Don't overthink it, okay? So I want you to take some time today and find some different items around the house or some food if you really want to have fun, and see if you can make rows and columns. And tomorrow I'm going to check in with you and see how that went. I I'm down in my basement, and I really should have brought some. I know Jordan has a box of Cheez-Its around here somewhere. Maybe tomorrow I'll bring some of those and we'll just review. But you're going to take things and you're going to set them. Remember, rows go across. So if you're walking into the movie theater, you look down the row. Rows go across, columns go up and down. Okay, so keep that in mind. I know that was short. And I know it probably wasn't extremely helpful. If you have questions, please text me, email me. We can set up a Zoom meeting and I'll try. I don't know, it's so hard over video. It's easier to sit down with you and just show you. But try your best. Try to make some rows and some columns and see if you can make them into a rectangle. Okay, let me know if you have questions. Bye.